All right, this is noisy, I know, but this is the Unit 2A test review. See, it says 2A. That's because it's only the first 3 sections of Unit 2. And we're doing a test over just 3 sections, so this is nice. All right, so I'm just going to jump right into these. And since this is a whole mix-up of the whole unit, it's just kind of all over the place with a little bit of review from Unit 1. So looking at number 1, what value of x makes this equation true? So in other words, this just means solve for x. I know that because I have an x here, I have an equal sign, I have an x here, and it says what value of x makes it true? I'm just solve for x. I know it doesn't save that, but it's just like number 2. If it said solve for x, it's the same as what value of x makes this true. Okay? So I'm going to do the same thing. So if you remember from before, hopefully you do. If not, this is good practice. This is why we have this on the test again, because some of y'all really need to. I have parentheses on both sides, so I'm going to distribute. So I distribute the outside number to both the inside numbers. Just like that. So remember, when I distribute, I multiply, I don't add. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 times x, that gives me 3x, and 3 times negative 4, that's negative 12. And then I carry down my plus 6, and then I do 5 times x, that's 5x, and 5 times negative 1, negative 5 plus 1. Okay, good so far, hopefully. Now, before I move stuff over from one side to the other, here's my equal sign, right? So if you need to draw a line, that's fine. But if I do that, on this side of my equation, notice I have 3 terms. I don't want 3 terms, I want 2. So if I have more than 2, I probably have too many, which means I can combine like terms first. Okay, so if I look, I have an x, I have a number with no x, I have a number with no x. I can combine my 2 numbers with no x. Okay, so look, my 3x doesn't change. Then I do negative 12 plus 6. That gives me negative 6. There's my equals. On my right side, if I draw my line, on the right side, I also have 3 terms, right? I have an x, a number with no x, a number with no x. So I can combine my 2 numbers with no x. So my 5x does not change. I can't combine that with anything. And I can do negative 5 plus 1. You get negative 4. Okay? Now I can move my x's to one side, move my numbers to the opposite side, and then divide, so I'm almost done. Now, I always move the smallest x. So between 3x and 5x, 3 is smaller. So I subtract 3x from both sides. Okay. And just for the sake of space, if x is going to go over to the right, my number has to go over to the left. So minus 4, if I do plus 4 on both sides, okay? So I do negative 6 plus 4 gives me negative 2. 5x minus 3x gives me 2x. And some of y'all can already see the answer, which is great. So when I have my 2x or whatever x, or at the end, my last step is going to be divide. So I'm going to divide by 2. Okay, so I have negative 2 divided by 2. That gives me negative 1 equals x. Or if you want to write x equals negative 1, it's the same thing. I don't care how you write it, as long as you have the right number. And that's my answer. Awesome. So, on to number 2. Okay. So, on this one, this just tells me solve for x. So I'm going to do the same thing as number 1. Okay? Now, if you notice on this one, I have no parentheses, so I cannot combine like terms. And then here's my equal sign. I have an x and a number on the left. I have an x and a number on the right. so I cannot combine like terms. But some of y'all might be looking at this and going, I don't like fractions. Fractions scare me. I am terrified of fractions. I'm going to have nightmares over this, which is fine. So if you don't like fractions and you want to get rid of them before you do anything else, remember you can always multiply everything by my denominator. And since my denominator is the same, I have a 2 and a 2, I can just multiply everything by 2. Okay? And when I mean everything, I mean it's like I'm distributing my 2 to every single thing in my equation. So I'm going to do 2 times 5 over 2, 2 times 4, 2 times x, and 2 times negative 9 over 2. Now if I do this, I get rid of all my fractions. So you can do this, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can skip this part and just use the fractions. That's totally fine. But I know this one's it makes it easier if you get rid of the fractions, so I'm going to do that. So if I do 2 times 5 over 2x, you get 5x. If I do 2 times 4, you get 8, equals 2 times x gives me 2x, and 2 times negative 9 over 2 gives me negative 9. Now, if I look at that equation right here without the fractions, that looks a lot easier to do. And then I don't have to worry about, am I going to add or subtract the fractions wrong, stuff like that. So, I mean, again, it's one thing that you do extra that gets rid of the fractions, and in my opinion, this makes it a ton easier for this question. So if you can do this if you want to, or if you just want to leave all the fractions, you still can do that. All right, so if I'm going to solve for x, though, I move the smallest x, which is 2. So I subtract 2x because it is positive. And because x's went to the right, my number has to go to the left. So I do minus 8, just like that. And I do 5x minus 2x gives me 3x, and then equals negative 9 minus 8 gives me negative 17. And then my last step, just like before, I divide, right? Now, on this one, I cannot divide 17 and 3. That does not reduce at all. So my answer is x equals negative 17 over 3. And I'm done with number 2. All right, number 3. Solve and graph the following. So I have to solve for x, and then I have this number line I have to graph it on, okay? So again, I'm going to solve just the same as I normally do with the equations. So if I look over here, I have no parentheses. I cannot distribute. And here's my inequality sign. So if I look on this side, my left side, I only have an x and a number. So I have 2 things. I'm good. But on the right, notice I have an x, a number, and an x. That means I can combine my like terms, which are the 2 x's. So I have 5x plus 3x gives me 8x plus 23. And then all of this stuff did not change. Okay, so far so good. Now, just like before, I move my smallest x, so minus 2x. And if my x's went to the right, my number has to go to the left. So plus 23 is now minus 23. All right. Negative 1 minus 23 is negative 24. Greater than, see that sign never changes, right? And then 8x minus 2x gives me 6x. And then my last step is to divide. Okay, so I'm going to divide negative 24 by 6. You get negative 4 greater than x. It's a weird looking x. So since I divide this way, right, I'd go over here and do that. So my number is on the left-hand side. I leave my number on the left-hand side. My sign is greater than. I still keep greater than. My x is on the right. My x stays on the right. Now, once you have your answer like this, if you'd like, this is where you can flip it. So remember, you can pretend there's a mirror and you do x greater than, oh, I'm sorry, see, I'm not even doing it, less than -4. So I can flip it, right? So I'm going to write it up here, x less than -4. Okay. If I were to read it starting with the letter, it would still be x is less than -4. I can write it this way, it just looks easier, or looks better that way. X is less than -4. Same thing. But it helps to have x on the left, so that way when you graph it, you can just follow the arrow. Okay, you don't have to if you don't need to. I just know a lot of people have missed that in the past, so if it helps, flip it. So I'm going to put -4 on my graph. Because my inequality is not underlined, I'm going to have an open circle. And because x is less than goes left. Just like that. And now I'm done with 3. And look, 4, I'm going to do the same thing, solve and graph. Only this time I have parentheses, which means I distribute. So I'm going to have 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 3 is 12. Inequality doesn't change, and then I can't do anything over here. Okay? Now I move my smaller x, so 4 is smaller than 6. And if my x's go to the right, my numbers go to the left. So negative or minus 24 becomes plus 24. Okay, so 12 plus 24 gives me 36. That sign does not change. Oh, I need to underline it. And 6x minus 4x is 2x. And then, of course, I divide by 2. That gives me 18 greater than or equal to x. Or, if I want to mirror it, it'd be x is less than or equal to 18. Okay? Now, to graph, I write 18 wherever I want to. My inequality is now underlined, right? So I'm going to do a closed circle, and x is less than goes left. And I'm done. So those aren't too bad. Those are just review, just more practice to get better if you're not already. Okay. Now, I have number 5. Now this is where we're getting to the stuff we learned this chapter, or unit. So 5, write the domain and range for the table of values, and then circle function or not a function. Okay. So if you remember, domain is x, range is y. So if I'm looking at my table, I have x and y. So x are the top numbers, y are the bottom numbers. So this is domain, this is range. So on the test, it'll have it already printed as a multiple choice. It'll ask for one or the other, not both. So you have to be able to know which one is which. So domain is always x, range is always y. So on the domain, I'll write my little fancy bracket. Some of y'all call that the ugly bracket. It's fine. It has feelings too. And I just simply write all my x values. Now notice I have 2 7s, so I don't repeat those. So I'm just going to do 5, 7, 1, 0. I don't have to write the 7 twice. And then range, I just write the same thing, but all my y values. So I have 8, 3, 7, 5, and 1. So that's domain and range. And then this is a function or not a function. Well, remember, on functions, I only care about my x values. I don't care about y, because nobody cares about y. And don't ask me why, I don't know. But terrible joke. So because I look at my x's, notice I have 2 7s that repeat. So if I have 2 of the same x, I cannot have that, so this is not a function. And I'm done with that question. And look, I'm going to do almost the exact same thing on 6. I want domain and range. So if I go through these, remember domain is x, range is y. So if I label these x, y, that might help you. Okay, so now for domain, I just go and write all my x values. For range, I go write all my y values. And then I just don't repeat if I have something that is repeating. So domain, I'm going to have fancy bracket and then -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And my other fancy bracket. And now for the range, I do my fancy bracket. I do 7, 0, -2, -4, and I don't repeat. So that would be it for that one. And then you have function or not a function, right? Again, function only matters about x, so I look at all my x's, and none of those repeat. Therefore, this is a function. I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. Okay, we got number 7. This one's easy. Is this a function or not a function? Again, I only care about x values. And if I look, none of these repeat, so this is a function. That one was super simple. And looking at 8. Again, I only look at x because no one cares about y. And look, I have 2 of the same x, therefore this is not a function. And I'm done with that one. Let's see, 2 more. Number 9, evaluate the given function when x equals -5. And then it gives me a function, right? So if it's telling me x is -5, I'm going to take this number right here and replace these two, well, I guess 3 x's. So anywhere you see an x, you change it to -5. And I always use parentheses. That way you don't accidentally write something and then do the wrong operation later. So when I write this out, I'm just going to have h of -5 equals 3x squared is 3. And then again, when you see the x, all I'm going to do is write parentheses and put my number there. Squared minus 2x, so 2 parentheses, my number, plus 6. Okay, now you can just type this in the calculator from here, and I get my answer. So here is my calculator. Okay, I just use these most of the time. I don't use the other ones very often. But I'm just going to type in, now I don't want to type in h of -5, that's not going to do anything. So you start after the equal sign, so I'm going to do 3 parentheses -5 parentheses squared minus 2 parentheses -5 and then plus 6. So my equation in my calculator should look exactly like the one that I wrote, which it does. And then I press enter. My answer is 91. And I'm done. That's it. So again, you just replace x with your number it tells you and figure out what number, the answer you get from that. So 10, look, we're going to do the same thing. Find g of -1 given g of x, and then it tells you the equation. So again, this in parentheses is x. So everywhere I see an x, I'm going to put -1 instead, and then find some answer, okay? So I have g of, instead of x, I put -1. 6 minus 3x. Okay, so 6 minus 3 parentheses. So instead of x, I put -1. And then minus 10. Okay, again, take out my calculator here. And I'm going to type this thing in. So starting after the equal sign, 6 minus 3 parentheses -1 minus 10. I get -1. Nice. And that's my answer. So -1, and I'm done. And that's it for the first page of the test review, and that's the end of this video.